In this video, you're going to be introduced to a compare and contrast essay. Now you will need to have out your writing journal and also your practice companion book. So the first thing I would like you to do in your writing journal is just to jot down, just do a quick write about everything that you already know about compare and contrast essays. Okay, so I want you to make a list, and you can pause the video now and make that list. So pause the video now. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the characteristics or what a compare and contrast essay consists of. So first of all, it shows how two or more things are alike and different. So comparing and contrasting. Okay, you do want to use some clue words. Okay, some similarities, some differences, things like that. And it also is important to include an introduction and also a conclusion. So some of those things will consist of your compare and contrast essay. So two or more things and how they're alike and how they are different. You want to use some clue words, which could be, for example, both, unlike, conversely, some things like that. And also, obviously, an introduction and a conclusion. Now I want you to turn to page 220 in your practice companion book, and I do want you to read over the compare and contrast essay titled Two Kinds of Towns, and read through that. Then as you're reading through that, I do want you to answer these two questions that are right on the screen. So pause the video, read through the model, and then also answer these two questions. So pause the video now. Now let's take a look at these questions up on the screen. And if you look at page 220, the setup of a compare and contrast essay is that it is 5 paragraphs, and that's what yours will be as well. Okay, so taking a look at that first question, what does the author do in the introduction? So if we take a look at the introduction, the author introduced and talked about both of the topics within the compare and contrast essay. So in the first paragraph, you will want to write this down. You want to talk about both topics and introduce both topics in the introduction. Now the second paragraph, what does the author do in the body paragraph? So second, third, and fourth, you can see that in the second paragraph, the author is comparing both topics, talking about the similarities between both of the topics. Okay, so second paragraph, you want to compare and discuss the similarities of both of the topics. Third paragraph, you want to start contrasting, talking about the differences. So you choose one of the topics. So the author chose European towns and talked about how they were different from Native American towns in that third paragraph. Fourth paragraph, you want to talk about the other topic that you're writing in your compare and contrast essay, and you want to talk about how it's different from the original topic that you talked about in the third paragraph. So, for example, in the writing model, the author is talking about Native American towns and how they are different and what makes them different from European towns. Okay, and then finally, in that final paragraph, you're going to conclude with a nice ending paragraph that kind of ties everything together, where you just briefly touch on some of the similarities and some of the differences that you have already discussed in paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. You do not, once again, just like every other piece, you do not introduce any new information in that final paragraph. So let's now take a look at some characteristics of a well-written compare and contrast essay. So first of all, has an introduction that tells what the essay will compare and contrast. So very important that you introduce to the reader what you're comparing and contrasting. And I do want you to write these down. You can abbreviate, or you don't have to write every single word, but get the ideas down from these bullet points. Next, compares the items and explains how they are similar. So very important with that. Next, contrasts the items and explains how they are different. You want to use clue words and phrases such as both, also, to, as well, on the other hand, however, but, and a while, to signal comparison and also that you're contrasting your two different topics, and then also has a conclusion that sums up the topic and makes the readers think. So these are the characteristics of a really well-written compare and contrast essay. I do want you to write these down. You may have to pause the video to write these down, but do so now if you need to. Okay, now that we have talked about the ingredients or characteristics for a compare and contrast essay, I want to go over the process of choosing a topic for a compare and contrast essay. Okay, now you're going to be doing this when you come to class today, so it is important to pick two interesting subjects that can be related somehow. So you don't want to do, a blender compared to football or anything like that. You do want to have them relate somehow, so you compare and contrast them. Now it could be, for example, now and then, before or after. Okay, so an example could be, what about games? So, for example, I recall reading that Native Americans invented the game of lacrosse. So I wonder how they played it. How is it different from lacrosse today? And now you will have time to research your topics to really get some good specific information about them. So don't feel as though you have to be an absolute expert about these topics, because you will be able to do some research. But it is important to choose two topics as you begin to think that are related somehow and that are also interesting to you as well. Okay, for example, some other ideas: farms in northern colonies and farms in southern colonies. Okay, another example that you may choose: the first Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving today. Watching movies at home and also at the theater. Obviously, these are not the only ones that you can choose, but some ideas as far as comparing and contrasting. So I'm not just having farms in northern colonies versus, going to the beach or anything like that. These topics are related, so you can see how even the first Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving today, one from the past and also one from the present as well, as far as the topic. Okay, so as you come to class today, and what we're going to be doing in class, we're going to be working in the ideas section of your writer's notebook, and we're going to make a list of possible compare and contrast topics for your essay. And then also by the end of the class today, you're going to be choosing a topic. So begin to think about two topics that you would like to compare and contrast. When we come to class today, we're going to be writing these down and actually choosing the topics. So this concludes the video on the introduction to compare and contrast essays. If you have any questions about this topic, please come and see me.